So many of you are probably not graphic designers, and I certainly am not, but there are tools that we all have access to that can help us produce images and graphics and design elements that can really help your readers. So we're going to walk through some examples of that now, and I'll show you some screenshots so that you can begin to create some of these yourself. Many of us are using Microsoft tools, Word, for example, and the Smart Art function in Word is a pretty powerful tool. I encourage you to play with this and give it a try. Spend some time looking at the different diagrams and elements that they have in there. You can see here I have a screenshot of the different process design options that they have, and that's how I created the visual that you saw earlier for the permits. You could also, depending on what you're trying to do, be more elaborate. You can break things out into whatever level of detail you need. These are easy to use once you start to play around with them. They don't give you full custom abilities, but you can accomplish a lot with the simple tools that are already in the software you're using. PowerPoint, of course, is a great presentation tool, and you may already be familiar with some of the design elements in here. Like with Word, you can insert shapes, and you can also copy things out of Word and bring them into PowerPoint, like we did with that permit example. There's a design function, the designer element in PowerPoint, that's pretty powerful. And my advice to you on that one would be go ahead and use it, explore it, figure out if there's a theme or a look that's really supporting your message. But you also want to be careful of not overdoing it. When you're making a presentation, having a good balance between what's being said and how the visual images are reinforcing that is important. You'll notice if you put a lot of words on the page and on the screen and read them to people, you're going to lose them. If you can have pretty simple, clean elements that reinforce your message, then people will pay attention to what you're saying. Our brains have a hard time tracking on two paths at once. So it's hard for people to listen to what you're saying while they're also reading. They're only going to do one or the other. So if you're giving a presentation and you're creating visuals for that, you really want to think about how to make sure that they are focused on what you're saying when you're speaking and not trying to read and listen at the same time. Excel, of course, is great if you have a lot of data and you want to present that visually. And you can find many tutorials online, and you can, of course, reach out to your colleagues. You probably know somebody who's good at using any of these programs who can help you come up with different ways to present your information. I also encourage you to keep an eye out for the visuals that really resonate with you. So whether you're just out in the world and you come across something that you find is powerful, or you see a presentation that's really effective, take note of that and start to look at how they're putting information together, what the visuals are doing, and why it's working for you. I think learning observational skills and learning to see what other people are doing that you find effective is one of the best ways to get better at this rapidly yourself. And I also encourage you to look for resources. There are many articles out there, especially for professionals, about how to take better pictures, how to learn to create your own visuals. So get out there and go see what your local community college has. Find out if you have a local art center that can help you develop more of a design sense. There are plenty of online courses like this one. Your professional association may have resources, and look to your network for connections. It's really important, I think, for all of us who want to do this well to just branch out and start to grow your knowledge, start to notice. You don't have to become the expert in how to do everything, but beginning to recognize it and know what you're shooting for is really helpful. I also encourage everybody to collect your own resources. Take photographs when you are out and about. You never know when you're going to find something useful. And quick sketches are easy. You can see in this example, I had to communicate what a micropile was for a construction project. I had it explained to me several times, and I couldn't find a really good graphic that I felt comfortable using. I didn't want to just steal something off the internet. So I actually drew this out and scanned it in and used it in my presentation. You probably, if you're comfortable doing that, you can probably create some pretty quick sketches that will be useful. You may know somebody else on your team who can do that for you, but don't be afraid to do something quick and easy to really get your message across. Look for things that are in the public domain, and don't be an image thief. This is one example of pulling things together, and this is that micropile sketch that I mentioned earlier, and we just put it in a newsletter that was going out about this construction project. And it was really much simpler to have this diagram and say this is what we're doing than to try to explain in a paragraph in a quick newsletter what was happening on the project. So again, having the right visual is really worth the investment. There are other graphic tools out there that many of us have access to and that are based on templates that you can adapt to suit your own purposes. So Canva is one of those tools, and especially if you're looking for ways to do infographics and other simpler communications, that's a great place to start. You can take any of these templates, and with some creativity, you can repackage them into being just about anything you need. That utility example that I showed earlier was a flow chart diagram from Canva that we really adapted to suit our needs. And they're not really difficult to use. They do take a little bit of practice, but it's a nice thing to get in there and play with when you're not under a deadline. You can find templates in here for social media posts, for flyers, for infographics, for full presentations, and just about anything you could need. So I encourage you to play with some of the things online and ask your colleagues and coworkers what they're using and how you can get better at using some of those. You can see in here, this is one example of a social media graphic where you can take the template that they have, you can put your own language in here, you can change the colors. They're really quite customizable. I think it's important for us to reach into this world because, as we talked about in Plain Language 101, we are operating in a visual world. There's a lot of information competing for people's attention, and we know that a one-page graphic document can get a lot of information across really quickly in a world where people are scanning and scrolling and moving pretty quickly past information. So I encourage you to try some of these out on your own. This is one example that was shared with me from Boston, and it's a great example of how you can pull all of this together in a public handout. So this is a flyer. You can see how it's a tri-fold document, and this is the front and back of the printed document. And they've done a lot of interesting things here. They've got visuals on the front. They have broken their text up with good headings. They have a mix of images, data, infographic type information, and there's a contact at the bottom so I know who created this. You could probably create something like this in a graphic design tool. You might even be able to make something like this in Word. So really starting to expand your use of the tools you already have is one way to start creating great visuals. If you have a graphic designer or access to one, you can really take things to the next level. There are examples you can find around the world of people using cartooning and other techniques to simplify information and get it across. There's a great example of an Australian company that used visuals to simplify their entire employment contract. So basically a cartoon employment agreement, and it's animated, and it became something that was really useful for setting the tone that they wanted with their company, and also really pushing the limits on what is a legal document. So look for those opportunities around you. You may not jump right to an employment contract, but posters, what kinds of rules can you make more visual? What kinds of instructions can have good graphics? What else can you do with really good visuals? There are a lot of resources available if you are making slides where you have to say, I know you can't read this, but then you really want to rethink your visuals. Start noticing what you respond to, what's catching your eye, and what do you stop reading? Where do you start to skim? And if you can bring that fresh eye to some of the work in your organization or in your group, you'll really start to find those opportunities to improve visually. This is a picture of some of my favorite resources for creating great visuals. Edward Tufte has a lot of information about visual displays of information, and there are many, many more out there. So I just encourage you to be curious and start looking for all those guides to making better visual information. In the next chapter, we're going to look at how you can take all this information about good visuals, good organization, good structure, and good writing, and start pulling it all together into a cohesive document.